So friends, this presentation is on the prose piece A Solitary Human Voice, which belongs to the second module, Speeches and Testimonies, of your A05 text signatures. A Solitary Human Voice is an excerpt from Voices from Chernobyl, the oral history of a nuclear disaster. This is a very important work written by, or in fact compiled by, Svetlana Alexievich. She is the winner of Nobel Prize in Literature for the year 2015. Svetlana Alexievich was born in Ivano-Frankivsk in Ukraine on 31st May 1948. Though she spent most of her life in the Soviet Union and present-day Belarus, due to political persecution by Alexander Lukashenko, who was the president of her country, Belarus, Svetlana Alexievich was forced to flee as an exile to Western Europe, and she remained in France, in Germany, and in some other countries for many years in exile. She began her career as a Belarusian investigative journalist, and she continued her writing career with such a surprising felicity of expression that she went on to develop her own type of or category of non-fiction, crafting oral histories or monologues based on witness testimonies. In fact, her non-fiction works, all of them, they gather a chorus of voices in order to describe voices which describe a specific historical moment. She wrote oral histories of several dramatic events in Soviet history, including the Second World War, the Soviet war in Afghanistan, the fall of the Soviet Union, and the Chernobyl disaster. Her books trace the emotional history of the Soviet and post-Soviet individual through carefully constructed collages of interviews. Thus, it is said that Svetlana Alexievich had been the memory and conscience of the Soviet people for over 3 decades in the 20th century. Now, let us see what her major works are. Her first book is titled War's Unwomanly Face, published in the year 1985. This book comprises monologues of women who speak about the various aspects of the Second World War, aspects of the war which had never been disclosed before. The second book is published in the year 1985. It is titled Last Witnesses. It is an oral history of children's experiences in the Second World War. The third work, published in 1990, titled Sinky Boys, Soviet Voices from a Forgotten War, is about the Soviet war in Afghanistan. And then you have your work, published in 1997, Voices from Chernobyl, the oral history of a nuclear disaster. The book is also known as the Chernobyl Prayer. And recently in 2013, she published Second Hand Time, which comprises the life stories of housewives, artists, party workers, students, and soldiers living through a time of political upheaval in the Soviet Union, the fall of the Soviet Union, and the 2 decades that followed the fall. Okay, you move on to your work, Voices from Chernobyl, the oral history of a nuclear disaster. But before that, I think all of you must have watched the 2 episodes from Sanjaram by Santosh George Kolangara. The 2 episodes, the link to these episodes have been shared in your WhatsApp group. Along with that, the Chernobyl series, the 5 episodes of the Chernobyl series, those links have also been provided. നിങ്ങളത് കണ്ടിരിക്കും. ചെർണോബിൽ ഡിസാസ്റ്റർ എന്താണ് എന്ന് ഈ സമയം കൊണ്ട് മനസ്സിലാക്കിയിരിക്കുമെന്നാണ് ഞാൻ വിചാരിക്കുന്നത്. ഇനി കാണാത്തവരുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ അത് കാണുക. ചെർണോബിൽ ഡിസാസ്റ്റർ എന്താണെന്നൊരു ഐഡിയ നല്ല പോലെ മനസ്സിലേക്ക് ആഴ്ന്നിറങ്ങാൻ ഈ 2 മെറ്റീരിയൽസ് നിങ്ങളെ സഹായിക്കും. ഇനി അത് വായിച്ചിട്ടില്ലാത്തവർക്ക് വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് യു ഹാവ് എ ബ്രീഫ് ഡിസ്ക്രിപ്ഷൻ ഓഫ് ദിസ് worst nuclear disaster in the history of the world. It has been provided here in this particular slide. I'll share the PPT, this PPT also via Google Classroom. So Chernobyl disaster is a nuclear accident that occurred on a Saturday, 26th April 1986, at the number 4 reactor in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant near the city of Pripyat in the north of the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. This is considered to be the worst nuclear disaster in history. It was caused by one of only 2 nuclear energy accidents which are rated at 7, which is the maximum severity on the international nuclear event scale. You have some more details there on the PPT. You can just browse through and understand what this nuclear disaster has been. The Chernobyl disaster, as you know, is considered to be the worst nuclear power plant accident in history, both in terms of cost and also casualties. It involved the lives and the hard work of more than 50 lakhs people, and it has ultimately cost an estimated 18 billion Soviet rubles. And now, Svetlana Alexievich's famous work, Voices from Chernobyl. Voices from Chernobyl is in fact the first book to present personal accounts of the Chernobyl tragedy. The book comprises interviews in the form of monologues given by thousands of people who were affected by the Chernobyl nuclear meltdown. These people were interviewed by Svetlana Alexievich. They were more than hundreds in number, and their stories are all heartrending. These stories reveal the fear, the anger, the uncertainty with which these people, most of them, still are forced to live. So Voices from Chernobyl is a crucially important work, and all those who have read it will know that it is unforgettable for its emotional power and also honesty. These people, Svetlana Alexievich, she makes them speak for themselves. She allows them to speak their trauma. It is a kind of therapeutic power that is instilled in all these victims of the nuclear accident when they are made to talk out their mind freely and openly. So the entire book becomes a catalogue of trauma, of lives which were disturbed by events which are so cataclysmic that the effects rippled around the whole planet. That is what your text says. The book begins with a brief account of the effects on Belarusia, where 2 million people live on contaminated land. The book comprises, as you know, accounts of interviews, the monologues from very many people. The longest piece runs to nearly 20 pages, but most other pieces are much shorter, and there are again some choruses with just one paragraph or two paragraphs from each individual. So you find in the book a broad range of voices. You have the wife of these are some of the speakers involved here. You have the wife of a first response fireman who took several weeks to die from radiation poisoning. In fact, the book begins and ends with the testimony of two widows. One is this young wife of a Pripyat firefighter who went at that night on Saturday to fight the blaze. He was just wearing his shirts. He was totally unprotected. And the text which is prescribed for you is about the story of the young pregnant wife of this firefighter who responded to the fire at reactor 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, and it tells us about the slow, untimely death of Vasily Ignatenko, the fireman. The voice recorded in your text, a solitary human voice, is that of Ludmila Ignatenko, who is the wife of Vasily Ignatenko. Okay, so that is the first episode in Voices from Chernobyl. And as I told you, the book begins and ends with the testimony of two widows. One is your prescribed text, the voice of Ludmila Ignatenko, and the last one is the wife of a liquidator, one of the 6 lakh men drafted in order to bury the topsoil and shoot every animal in the zone. Okay, then you have the other voices include self-settlers who stayed behind, or some of them they returned to the contaminated zone after some time. Then you have Russian refugees who were forced to flee from Tajikistan. In fact, these people they prefer the risk of radiation to those of young men with guns. And then you have conscript soldiers. Conscript soldiers are soldiers who are recruited compulsorily, whether they wish it or not. They had to come to the war zone. Conscript soldiers who were forcibly sent in to evacuate people or to work as liquidators, plowing under crops, trees, topsoil, and houses. Now you have hunters employed to kill abandoned cats and dogs. You have helicopter pilots and unprotected men on foot who cleared the roof of the reactor after robots failed to work in the intense radiation. നിങ്ങൾ ആ ചെർണോബിൽ സീരീസ് കണ്ടിട്ടുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഇത്തരം എല്ലാ ആളുകളുടെയും അനുഭവങ്ങൾ അതിനകത്ത് വളരെ കൃത്യമായിട്ട് തന്നെ ഷൂട്ട് ചെയ്തെടുത്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. വല്ലാതെ ടച്ചിങ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരുപാട് എപ്പിസോഡ്സ് നമുക്കതിൽ കാണാം. ഒരുപാട് ആളുകളുടെ അനുഭവങ്ങൾ കാണാം. ലിക്വിഡേറ്റേഴ്സിൻ്റെ, ഹണ്ടേഴ്സിൻ്റെ, ഈ സോൾജേഴ്സിൻ്റെ എല്ലാവരും തന്നെ അതിൽ ഫിഗർ ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. ദെൻ യു ഹാവ് ചിൽഡ്രൻ വിത്ത് ബർത്ത് ഡിഫെക്ട്സ്. Then people who used contaminated food and equipment, or people who recycled it and sold these equipment in the black market. Then you have the experiences of scientists and health workers who try to alert people to the risk of radiation. And there are officials and bureaucrats who spoke out, and many others who followed the line. So Voices from Chernobyl becomes a powerful book, and it was awarded the National Book Critics Circle Award in the year 2005. Here you have the book cover with a short description of the book. And finally, there is the picture of the Chernobyl nuclear reactor weeks after the disaster, the photograph taken in May 1986. So, in the next presentation or in the next class, we'll move on directly to your text, A Solitary Human Voice. Thank you.